Okay. So according to YouTube, we are now streaming live. We have moved from Facebook to YouTube. Steve's telling me we're not live. If we are, I do apologise.
I think it is now.
We're live now. Hello, everybody. Good Friday evening to you. Good Friday. We have now moved these weekly webinars to YouTube, which we will be at every Friday night at 7 o'clock. We had a few problems with the Facebook thing this week, and so we thought it very appropriate to make the subject of this week's webinar gremlins. Internet gremlins and the nightmares that we all have with them. Now, don't think for a second that you're the only person sitting there at home saying, I can't make it work. You are not alone. We've all been in this situation, and we're going to share some interesting, good stories with you tonight to hopefully make you feel a little less alone, and hopefully give you some even more good tips than we've already given you in the last few weeks. So joining me tonight is Field Marshal General Phil Aird, CEO of ESTA Education, Puppet Master John Shaler, and tech genius guru Steve Bingham. And I'm Nicole Wilson, and I'm in charge of these gentlemen and fielding the questions that you've been sending in to us. So first of all, I'd like to go round the room and ask what's been the most useful new thing you've discovered online since lockdown? Phil.
Well, it was actually an app I first downloaded about 2 years ago, and then, as you often do with apps, just slowly forgot about it, and it re-emerged about a week ago, and it was still going strong and very, very useful. It's an app called Practice Presto, and it's on it's available as an app both for Apple iOS and for Android. And it's great for controlling all your teaching, and that's in terms of delivering the lesson, but also uploading content and being able to comment on any extracts or videos that your pupils want to send through the week. So it acts as a portal for teaching, but also a sort of continuous communication with the pupil. But I can hear all the safeguarding questions coming through. So just to preempt that, when you use the app, actually the contract and the app is downloaded by the parent, and you use a parent's email address, and therefore any communications that take place are between you and the parent and the student. So it's a three-party system. And also the lessons are recorded and held by Practice Presto. That's an entirely different company. Are also held by Practice Presto for 12 months. So a useful safeguarding device as well. So that's the most useful thing I've come across this week.
What about you, John? You've been doing lots of online teaching for relatively the first time since this all started?
Oh, good Lord, yes, it's completely new to me. A couple of things I've gleaned during the week, well, whenever it was I was last on. The first is what happens when signal sort of gets a bit weak. And my advice on that is don't panic. It generally tends to come back. So it's just keeping the attention of the pupil, especially if they're quite young, and somehow getting through the period when the signal seems to go off. That seems to happen more on Skype than others. Another thing, I had a central board meeting, and I was asking Bruno Girana, our international president, who's now 80-something. Years old, and is no technophobe at all. He's really into it. And I've been asking him how he teaches his pupils online, which he's been doing in great numbers. And what he does is he gets them to record on a YouTube channel that he's got somehow. I don't. You guys know better than I do how to set that up. But he gets them to play their piece via YouTube. And then the online lesson, the discussion part, is about a discussion as to how they played and how they can improve it. The advantage of this is you can hear much more accurately how they actually sound. because all our experience on the servers we've been using, the Zoom and so on, Skype and FaceTime is what I've been using, is that the sound is not good. And I do have a tip, although somebody else might like to do it, from Nick Evans Pugh, our member from the Itchen area, who suggests get the pupil to put a mute on. And I finally found a pupil who had one, which took some time. Actually, all the youngsters, of course, haven't got them, although you can get them online very, very cheaply. And it might be worth it. But I did eventually find a pupil who had a mute and put it on. And yes, it improves the sound. It makes the instrument sound much more like a real one. I think it's something to do with high frequencies being cut out. And it doesn't overload the server in a way that the unmuted instrument can do. That's about it for me.
Well, yeah, so if for those of you who are wondering, with YouTube, you want to make your channel or the videos certainly unlisted. You've got a choice of public, which means anybody can search for them. Private, which means you have to be only certain people that you've given permission to, they can only view them through their account. And then there's unlisted, which means you can only find them if you know the exact long-winded address of what they are. So if you're looking at an over 18 person, that's kind of a fairly safe way to do it. Generally, it's often done like that. Yeah. Steve, perhaps you could give us a bit more information on the technical side of, I think what John's referring to with the mute is that the violin or the instrument can overwhelm the microphone.
Yeah, I guess it's, I mean, I haven't tried this myself, but there is feedback coming through from people saying that the mute does help. So it'll be to do with the upper partials, the harmonic series that define what sound an instrument makes. It's the way that synthesizers work. They try to recreate those sounds, and it's why they're not very good at string instruments, because it's a very complicated series of upper partials and harmonics. Anyway, just, I mean, I think that, you know, if it's worth trying. I think from John's experience and from Nick Evans Pugh originally, definitely it's worth people trying that with mutes. Why not?
Yeah.
If it doesn't make a difference, it doesn't. But if it does, great, you know.
I also find getting the student as far back from the microphone or the device as possible. So if they have a separate plug-in mic, put the mic far away, put it behind the computer, put it under the table, and everything like that. If it has a gain control, turn it down. But if they are just on their device, as far back as they can go, within reason, so they can still see you, it really helps. That normally that does. So that's what.
Yeah, I mean, so many of these things are a little bit of trial and error. But to go back to your original question, just because I'd been thinking about it as it went round the circle, I think, you know, because I was aware of quite a lot of the technical things anyway, the most interesting discovery in lockdown for me, I think, was how much fun it was, or could be, to interact with people on the platform like Zoom. I've got a friend who does a virtual pub on a Monday evening, and I've got another folk music friend who is doing folk music evenings, folk clubs. Now you can't, as we've said, we discussed in these forums before, you can't play together because of the latency. But what I'm finding there is that everybody, in line with good practice in these things, is muting their microphone when they're not the main person. So when somebody's playing, they're muting their microphones, but then they'll be getting their instruments and playing along in the background. And of course that's great, because that doesn't matter. Their lag is not anybody else's lag, so they can play along. And that's been a really nice thing. So that's been the nicest thing I've discovered. And then just, I think, going back to YouTube, the point John made about Bruno's pupils using YouTube, and Nicole, you've said what I was going to say quite clearly about the unlisted thing about that. But I think the other discovery I've made is I knew about it, which was YouTube Live, but I'd never actually used it. And it is very simple and very easy. So there are two ways that you can upload to YouTube. You can pre-record your lesson or your video or your whatever it is that you're doing, and then upload it. But the YouTube Live interface is very simple. And provided your channel has been in existence for more than 24 hours, you can live stream. You can't live stream off a mobile device until you've got 1,000, I think it is. They sometimes change the figures. At the moment, I think it's 1,000 subscribers. But some of you may know my wife is a Church of England minister. So we've been live streaming services, and we decided to set up a YouTube channel for that. And because that was a new YouTube channel, we had to wait 24 hours to do the first live stream. So it's worth planning ahead if you're thinking of doing that for lessons or concerts or whatever it is. And also we couldn't use a mobile device because being a small town in North Norfolk, she didn't immediately have 1,000 subscribers to her channel. But you can use a laptop or a desktop computer. So we've been streaming from my laptop. So I think the YouTube thing is really worthwhile. I think that's a really good idea from Bruno to get students to record, because you can record on your iPad or your iPhone or your Android phone very easily and with very good quality these days. And that will give the teacher, I think, the best opportunity to assess the progress and the musical side of it. But it's interesting listening to some of the shared folk music evenings that I've been at. The quality of the signal has varied hugely. Somehow it's still rather enjoyable.
Yes.
And the one I'd like to share with you is a website called sightreadingfactory.com. It's one I've known about for a few years, actually. I have students who I'm preparing. I'm normally sort of back to back trying to prepare, pieces, concertos, sonatas. They've got competition coming up, etc. But then they end up playing an orchestra and freaking out because I can't keep up. I can't manage. I can't sight read. And I say, no, it's not true. Everybody can sight read. As my father, Ted Wilson, always said to me, he said it's practice. You can practice doing it. It's a muscle. And so there's an amazing site. It's just incredible. Sightreadingfactory.com. It creates sight reading. It's never ever been seen before. And you choose the level you want. There's 6 levels. They don't correspond to grades. So just try a low level and then work your way up. You can choose, the key signatures, the time signatures, difficult rhythms, and then you can have a cursor that follows along for you to show you, are you keeping up? So if you haven't got somebody with you saying, no, you did that bar wrong, it will tell you. There's a little metronome that goes along with it. It's very customizable and it's free. It's free. I think you can use 20 lots of sight reading on it for free. And then you can pay, and it's not very expensive. I can't remember exactly how much, but it's really, really worth it. And for my students who tell me they can't sight read it, I set them, I said, one a day. I say one a day, but no one's going to die. Go on, have a go. It'll take you about 3 minutes. And that's far and away one of the best online resources I think is out there. So Steve's got his hand up.
I've got a great idea for the next webinar, is that we each set the hardest level we can think of on the sight reading. And we want to go. Yeah, it's like live sight reading. I mean,
after you, Steve.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I'm doing my hair next week, actually.
Yeah,
that's called living on the edge, isn't it, Steve?
It is a great. No, I've used that site though, and it is a great site. Very good.
I did have a question for the tech gurus that I'm sitting alongside in a virtual way here, and that's I've used FaceTime, I've used Skype. And I've used Skype for years because we've had all our ESTA meetings on Skype since God knows when, and also Zoom. And I'm just, is there a noticeable difference in quality between these different servers, or are they pretty much of a muchness, which is what I seem to have found out? But I'd be interested in the technical view on that.
The thing I notice is that Zoom is more customizable. There's lots of settings in the audio settings that you can, that can really help you. And it depends on your device at both ends. It depends if you've got plug-in mics, if you've got headphones. It has this option to switch on original sound that we spoke about in our first webinar, which stops the sound being compressed and various things. You have to have headphones on if you're using original sound, but it doesn't always make the sound better using these settings. You need to practice. You need to work out what works best with your device. And if it's not going well with a student, whatever software you're on, experiment with things like the distance that they're from the device. It's a really important one. Try headphones on and off. With Zoom, I'm just looking in the video settings now. There's one I forgot to mention last time. If you go into the audio settings, there's an option to automatically adjust the microphone volume. Now, what that does is, because if somebody suddenly starts getting very up and down when they're speaking in the meeting, it just calms it down. But the thing with music, of course, is you want the up and down, probably. You want those dynamics and the color changes and stuff. So you might want to switch that off. But again, try it, because it depends how old your device is. I mean, John, you have a lovely new iPad, and we're seeing you in great Technicolor here, and it's great. And you were saying that you don't really need a plug-in microphone with this new iPad, which is great.
Well, I haven't felt the need, which is just as well, because I don't possess a microphone.
This is probably quite a good test for those of you listening to this, is that I'm speaking directly into the built-in microphone on my iMac. John, you're in the built-in microphone on your iPad.
Yeah.
You've got your Blue Yeti, have you?
I have my Blue Yeti, but I have it quite a distance away because I was teaching on it earlier on. So,
and Phil?
Just a MacBook mic built in.
So certainly for voice, unless people listening can detect massive differences, they're much the same, I think, certainly what I'm hearing here.
But it does depend on which instrument you're playing as well, though. So speaking, you might not notice much of a difference at all, but playing, you probably really will.
Particularly with the high frequencies or bass, in fact, if you're double bass. I think so. We had a little discussion of that in one of the early sessions, didn't we? Yeah. It's about frequency response on microphones.
I probably make 4 or 5 hours of conference calls a day. And it's sort of split. I know it's terrible. It's sort of split between 50% Skype, 50% Zoom, and there's very little difference for me in the sound quality because it's spoken word. But I have found that Zoom wins just with stability. I've had far more sort of little crashes and resettings of computers and rebooting with Skype than I've had with Zoom. So I find it quite stable.
Well, back in the day when we started using Skype, it was pretty difficult, wasn't it? It was rare that we would start a meeting on time because always there was some sort of problem. And we would often have to stop the call altogether and start again. So the improvement has been amazing over those years. Yeah. But even so, I agree. That's the one that did sign up a weak signal when I was teaching.
Just going back to microphones, Nicole, if that's okay.
Yes, I was just going to mention that. Yes.
Because we did have a couple of questions, and we did talk about this in an earlier session. But a couple of people have said, well, how much shall I be paying? And we had a question this evening about how to plug what socket you're using. Somebody who had a computer that didn't have a specific microphone socket. And basically, most of the microphones you can get these days are just going to be USB connectors. So you either need to make sure it's the right type of USB for your device or get an adapter, which are very cheap and easy to get these days. And I think the advice that I've been giving, and Nicole, I'd like, happy for you to come in on this as well, is I think certainly don't spend over 100 quid unless you really see something that you think is going to do massively good frequency response for your instrument. And maybe just go for a name that you're aware of in the high street brands, rather than something you've never heard of. And that's a very broad and unhelpful thing, but there are such a huge number of things out there. It's very difficult to, we've given a few specific advice about what we use, but
actually that's quite a good thing, because I think we've all shared our sort of top tips this evening, and it would be great if our members and listeners could help us by sending in their discoveries and top tips.
Yeah, actually, if you've got a microphone that you're really liking, let us know, and what instruments you're teaching. That would be really great. Very helpful.
I would also say that the big jump in price comes, as far as I'm aware, when you have gain control on the mic. And that is a really useful thing, but it does make it a lot more expensive. And to be honest, you can get around that by just putting it behind the computer or under the table. You just need a bit of distance from the microphone. So you don't need to spend that. You should be looking really about 30, 40 quid. Shouldn't really need to be more than that. Unless you're on a very big instrument. If you're on a grand piano, you might be looking a bit more carefully. Drop us a line if you are.
Nicole, what is gain control?
You know, Phil, I've no idea. But I know that if you turn it down, you sound much better.
Basically, it's the sensitivity of the microphone. So it's a volume control for the microphone, in effect.
It's a posh word for volume. Okay.
Oh, yeah, but it's not the
So any sound engineers out there listening are now just having slight fits.
Printing. Sorry.
That's basically it, the volume. Yeah.
But
It's the
basically,
sensitivity.
as you're playing, if it's overwhelming the microphone and the sound's coming and going, if you can turn the gain down, it then seems to just cope with it a lot better.
Okay,
So
right.
it's a win, it's a winner.
With digital sound, which we're all on these days, there's a certain amount of headroom, a certain amount of leeway in the volume. But when you get beyond that leeway, it clips, and it's to do with the fact that the software can't cope with that sound, and it actually clips off. It takes off some of the signal, so you actually lose some of the information from the sound, and that's clipping on, and it's a digital thing. So that's why it's important not to be too loud on these things, because if you lose part of the signal, it's lost, it's gone. If you're a little bit too quiet, and then the user at the other end turns their volume up, they can make it a little bit louder, and they're not losing any of the signal. And that's the sort of basic in a nutshell. Again, all sound engineers are now hating me.
Yeah, but it's useful advice still. We've got a question that came in from Alison, who said to me that, what does she say? Let me find it here. What's the easiest and most straightforward and preferably free, good point, Alison, way to build a video with audio collage, like the one she's seen posted on Facebook? Is there a particular app that will do this? Yes. In fact, there's lots out there, but a great one that I've been having fun with these last couple of weeks is called Mixcord, Mixcord. So there's no H in that. .co, and then if you put into Google acapella Mixcord, ACAPELLA Mixcord, it'll come up, and it's just a lovely app. It's on your phone or your tablet. It's not on your computer. It's not going to ever do an amazing sound, because it's through the tablets and the phone. You're not going to do it to make some posh recording, but it's a lovely, fun way to play, to put a piece together with some friends. There's some great little video options. So you're not just all in tiles, you can be in little teardrops and hearts and stars and all sorts of things. You can have up to 9 people in a
I'll be in a teardrop, please.
There you go. Maybe we'll do one for you next week.
Yeah, thanks.
There you go, gentlemen. You can have up to 9 people in a window doing it. If you wanted to have more than that, you want to probably be looking at something like iMovie, which can be kind of hard to start with, but persevere. If you've got the time, there's tutorials out there on YouTube that will show you every bit on how to do it. And there's great options there for doing a sort of a more complicated thing. Mixcord has a limit of 10 minutes on it. And if you have the free version, it's very limited on what you can do. But it's a really nice app, and it's really good fun. Which we do on next week, gentlemen? Silence.
Well, ready for anything these days.
Are you? Yes.
Well, I rather feel the onus is on our membership for next week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, well, okay, all right then.
Well, yeah, we have got this question, of course, about the Eine kleine Nachtmusik thing and how to do that. I found a pair of these, which is very exciting, which is going to help.
Perhaps, John, you could just recap on what that is, the virtual orchestra.
Phil will tell you, because he's in charge.
Oh, right, great.
Well,
it's called delegation.
Yeah, have a look in your inboxes, because on yesterday we sent out an email to all our members, inviting them to join the ESTA Virtual Orchestra. And that means that we need you to record video and sound, the first movement with first repeat of Eine kleine Nachtmusik by Mozart. Now, you need something to follow. You need a track to follow. So if you go to www.partplay.co.uk, there is on that homepage a recording by the Bingham Quartet of that very piece.
Whoever they may be.
And you don't need to sign in, you don't need to sign up. You simply press play, and you can play along with it. There is a mute and solo function above each player's head, so you can isolate each track and practice playing along. So if you want to play the viola part, you can mute the viola part and play along with the other 3. And when you've rehearsed and you're happy enough with it, I suggest you get a second device, ideally, and or get somebody, a friend, to hold your smartphone and to record yourself playing that piece. Then you send it to us via, there are various various bits of software you can use to send this up to us, because the file size will be very, very big, so far too big to email. But they're all how to do it's all in this set of instructions. I think one of the most popular ways is to send it by WeTransfer, and again, that's completely free service. And Steve will spend the next how many days locked in a dark room, mixing together all your audio and video to produce one fantastic orchestral ESTA video of Eine kleine Nachtmusik, which we shall premiere on YouTube. Have I covered everything, Steve?
I've had 2 submissions already, which is nice, including a double bass, which is lovely. So 2 down, quite a few more to go. I like what you said about having a mute and solo button above our heads, Phil. We'll just do a...
When's the deadline for this?
Mute button above my head. When's the deadline? Next week, I believe.
Thursday.
There are 2 things I'd like to ask, because I've been trying to work out how to do this at home. The first is I can do it on the Part Play app, presumably, which I have installed on my iPhone.
Yes.
On my iPad, that's fine. So it's not just the website. You can.
No. I mean, we just because you have to pay for the app. It's $2.99, but we didn't want to make people pay, so it's free on the website. Right.
The problem is the sheet music, because you've got one device doing the video, one device doing part play. So how do you get the music? I found an answer.
You memorise.
It's well, yeah. I'm talking about the viola part here, for God's sake. Nobody remembers that. The way to do it is to go on. Is it IMSLP or whatever it's called? Just find that, print it.
imslp.org, that is.
.org.
Go along and for practice purposes, you can have a look at that, and you can download. Please read all the words about the disclaimers if you do that. That's very important.
But I think you can print it. I think it's out of copyright, so I think you could just print it, put on a music stand, and off you go. Which is my solution. Or you can just have it on a 3rd device if you have one.
Very good. We'll look forward to hearing all your submissions in by Thursday, please. What time on Thursday? Midnight?
Ooh, what do you think, Steve?
Lunchtime? Give you time to mix it before Friday night webinar?
We're not going to turn anybody away. By midnight.
Oh, there you go. By midnight. Steve will be waiting up for your submissions. Great. I've just got a few questions just quickly come in. I just wanted to answer. Somebody has said that, do I need a Blue Yeti mic? It doesn't have to be a Blue Yeti. That just happens to be the one that I have and I enjoy using. But as long as you have a USB mic, and if you don't have the right port, you can buy an adapter for it. So that's all you really need to know. And then here's an interesting one. Steve, perhaps you could answer this one. I want to use screen sharing on my iPad and show the music which I want to annotate with fingerings and bowings, etc. Which app should I use? Notability? This person says. I don't know.
Yeah, that's not one that I know.
To be honest, when I do that, what I do is I take a photo of my copy and I email it to the student in advance, and I say, write the bowing in your part.
Yeah, I mean, if you're using screen sharing and the screen sharing that you're using is on a device which literally will share any other app that you've got opened on the device, then on Apple portable devices, I use Fourscore for PDFs of music, because that seems to be a very, very widely regarded one. It's got lots and lots of options for getting your scores into the machine and annotating them and cleaning them up if they're scans, and it will even do its own scans. So Fourscore for me is the one that I use, but as with all these things, there are lots more out there.
It's
one of the things.
Forscore.
That's right. Yeah.
One of the things I've discovered very briefly in doing this teaching online is that I've been forced to make the pupil write in the part, where normally in a normal lesson I find myself just writing pencil marks. Put fingerings in and put bowings in. without just telling them what to do. Now I'm finding actually I can't do that anymore. That's really good because you're actually getting the pupils to be much more proactive by writing fingerings and bowings in themselves, and you have to discuss it, and you have to ask, in a sense, their permission to do that. So I think that's a real benefit, and it will change the way I teach in the future.
Just go back.
Sorry,
go on.
I was just going to say I agree with you 100%, John. It changes the way I teach, having started doing this online. Absolutely, and it's very interesting seeing how some of my students have really adapted so well. Some of them are concentrating harder for me now than they do when I'm in the room. Not all of them.
That's my experience as well.
Yeah. Go on, Steve.
One of the interesting things I found, just going back a step to the using scores on devices, I was very reluctant to start putting music on a device, but because when I'm doing looping and things like that, I've got lots of single sheets of music of things. I've started putting those on, and one of the nice things there is that a lot of the music I've got ends up with lots of markings over the years, and I'm not very good with rubbing things out, so it gets very messy. And one of the nice things, if you've got things on an iPad, you can actually clean them up very easily. So actually, it's really good for marking stuff up. I'm finding I'm definitely a convert to having 100 scores or 1,000 scores on one portable device. Rather lovely. I can't see it quite yet with conducting. That slightly not quite.
Only a matter of time, Steve.
But playing violin very useful, as long as you don't mind doing the foot pedal. But there are now apps, which is not for tonight, but another time. There are now apps that will use the microphone to listen to what you're playing and then turn the page for you automatically. That's nice.
And make your gin and tonic to go with the music as well. That would be the next step.
That'd be great. There will be some reviews of a couple of those apps in the next Arco magazine in July. We're going to have a few reviews of some of those. So anybody that is looking out for those and doesn't ensure what to use, we'll have some interesting reviews, hopefully.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, gentlemen. It's been fun. I hope you're all feeling a little bit less alone, and understanding that we also are finding our way. We hope your students are also getting a bit more on board with it as time goes on. We'd love to hear from you about the apps which you've enjoyed using the most. Many of them will be new to us, I'm sure. There's so many out there. Let us know which ones have been fantastic, and also any that haven't been great as well. That would be useful for us to be able to share with the community. But thank you very much for joining us. Next week, we're back with a webinar on well-being. Is that right, Phil?
Well-being, indeed.
Very good. So please join us then here on YouTube at 7 o'clock. Thank you very much, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Bye-bye, everyone.